So when I was growing up, I used to listen to a song called "The Coward of the County" by Kenny Rogers, and it was one of my all-time favorite songs because it was about a meek young man, and I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, because I come across as a strapping football player type, but in actuality, I am fairly meek. I like nerdy things. So when I hear a song about a meek guy who everyone calls a coward just because he doesn't fight, and then one day he, is presented with a challenge and rises to the occasion and fights and everybody respects him, I cheer. Except if you actually listen to the song, because it is the most disturbing song to ever reach number one, I think maybe in the history of the charts. I mean, you listen to the Beatles go, "She was just 17, if you know what I mean," and you go, oh my goodness, they're talking about some really weird stuff here. Or if you listen to "Baby It's Cold Outside" and you go, oh God, this is a little gross, you've seen nothing yet, because this thing is going to blow your mind. Let's get into it. So I'm going to go down verse by verse, and it starts innocuous enough. Everyone considered him the coward of the county. He'd never stood one single time to prove the county wrong. His mama named him Tommy, but folks just called him Yella. My dad used to laugh at that line every single time. But something always told me they were reading Tommy wrong. So we're focused 100% on Tommy. So far, so good. No big deal. He was only 10 years old when his daddy died in prison. I looked after Tommy because he was my brother's son. So this is told from the point of view of Kenny Rogers, who's the uncle of Tommy. Still weird that he would refer to him as my brother's son. But you know what? It's poetic license they're trying to keep with a scheme. I still recall the final words my brother said to Tommy: "Son, my life is over, but yours had just begun." And let's get into the chorus. "Promise me, son, not to do the things I've done. Walk away from trouble if you can." Now, it don't mean you're weak if you turn the other cheek. I mean, Jesus did that, right? "I hope you're old enough to understand. Son, you don't have to fight to be a man." We're two verses and a chorus in, and guys, nothing bad here. Tommy came from trauma. We understand where he's coming from. We understand why he would not fight. All is well. It's verse 3 when things get weird. "There's someone for everyone, and Tommy's love was Becky. In her arms, he didn't have to prove he was a man." We're using a very outdated sense of the word man, but you understand the masculine ideal here. "But one day while he was working, the Gatlin boys came calling. They took turns at Becky, and there was 3 of them." We're in a mainstream song that was on the radio that people listened to. Children listened to. Children and their parents. Dogs, canaries, butterflies were out flying when the song was playing. This is from the 1970s, and the line was just, "They took turns at Becky, and there was 3 of them." So we just have a gang assault in the middle of this song. So I assume the song will stop and we'll just go into heavy therapy for Becky for the rest of the song, because we just took a real big left turn and it would be weird to just leave it sitting there. "Tommy opened the door and saw his Becky crying. The torn dress, the shattered look was more than he could stand. He reached above the fireplace, took down his daddy's picture." I assume to ask his daddy's picture if there's any therapists nearby that we could go deal with Becky's trauma. As tears fell on his daddy's face, he heard these words again. So we go back to the chorus where he says, "Promise me, son, not to do the things I've done." I almost as if this is a story about Tommy and Tommy's issues and not what Becky just went through. Obviously, in the 4th verse, we'll move away from this and deal with Becky's problem. Oh, the Gatlin boys just laughed at him when he walked into the bar room. So we've left Becky. We get 4 lines with Becky, and then we leave her after the Gatlin boys took turns at her. And now Tommy is going to the bar room. One of them got up and met him halfway across the floor. Tommy turned and they said, "Hey, look, old Yellow's leaving." But you could have heard a pin drop when Tommy stopped and locked the door. I'm not going to lie to you. When I was a kid, I always used to get goose pimples at that moment. I'm like, you get him, Tommy. As an adult, I hear this and I think, what, Tommy, Becky's at home. You should be with Becky. You should be helping Becky. Why aren't you with Becky? So 20 years of crawling bottled up inside him. Tommy left the bar room. Not a Gatlin boy was standing. He beat up all the Gatlin boys for their gang assault on Becky. He said, "This one's for Becky," as he watched the last one fall. Good work, Tommy. He picks up the picture. He goes, "I promised your dad not to do the things you've done. I'll walk away from trouble when I can. Now, please don't think I'm weak. I couldn't turn the other cheek. And Papa, I sure hope you'll understand. Sometimes you got to fight when you're a man," and everybody applauds the toxic masculinity that Tommy just put there. Now, obviously, this song is from over 40 years ago, but it was a number one hit. I think it brings up a good point that we don't really consider, especially as men, and how much of the media is created by men for men, which is, this is a horrific tale of a woman being destroyed by three men who attacked her. And at the end of it, we're supposed to cheer because Tommy's no longer yellow. This is a story about Tommy where the horrific thing that happened to Becky was just a jumping off point so that everybody could learn a he lesson. Now, it's a song. You get 3 minutes. You don't really get the chance to tell the full tale of humanity. But the song is uninterested in Becky. And a lot of media is uninterested in other points of view. It doesn't mean that Tommy doesn't have a story that's worth telling. But I think we can all agree that the moment Becky is assaulted, it's no longer Tommy's story. It's Becky's story. So when you talk about songs that you can't believe that they were hits, this was a number one hit. They made a movie out of this in 1981 that had Kenny Rogers in it as Tommy's uncle. And nobody in the early 80s stopped and went, "This is a gross story." They said, "Wow, good work, Kenny. Let's make a movie out of it." When we talk about representation and having different people's points of views about things, I think this is what we talk about. If we had stopped for just 1 second and realized that Becky's story is a lot more tragic, maybe we don't cheer at the end when the Gatlin boys fall to the ground, but we realize that the trauma did not end after the beatdown in the bar.